Welcome to today's PAWSCAST.
Good day and welcome back to the PAWSCAST, live here at Frostburg State University. I'm Don Swager, Director of the SAFE Office and your host. Well, the last time that we were together, we had the privilege of meeting John Wright, who is an assistant professor here at Frostburg State University with the Exercise and Sports Science program. Man, John, welcome back.
Glad to be back.
We had a great time. And I know that I got some phone calls already. We just put that episode out, and some faculty members and staff members were really excited about the information that you shared.
So it was good information.
It was good information.
And good feedback.
It was good feedback.
Fantastic.
And thanks for coming back.
All right, definitely.
For those of you that missed part one, you'll want to go back and watch it. And you know, John, again, has been with the university for 29 years, right?
This is my 29th year.
Yeah, and so he specializes in, you know, health and fitness and conditioning, works with athletes and non-athletes, personal trainer, you name it, he's done it. A wealth of information. And I just wanted to say the last time that we were together, some of the resources that you shared, I looked into. We ended up talking about belly fat and what do you do with it? And that's something that I'm trying to work out. So I want to thank you personally because it really hit home for me. And the information really was a kind wake-up call. You know, I learned some things that I didn't know, and I want to begin making some progress in that area. So thanks.
Oh, fantastic. Awesome. Yeah.
So that's kind of a catalyst into, you know, getting into the next question, and that is, what's the difference between weight loss and fat loss?
Oh, so glad you asked this question. This is the bane of my existence. Too often we focus on weight loss, and all weight is you know, how we react to gravity. It's when we stand on a scale, we're looking at pounds or kilograms if you're anywhere else other than the U.S. But you're just looking at you know, how you react, your mass to gravity. But what weight loss, well, weight doesn't really give you an indication of is what you are composed of. And so we call that body composition. And what body composition really is what percentage of your mass, of your body, is bone, is muscle, is body fat. Like, I mean, there's different types of body fat. Like we mentioned last episode, you have your visceral fat, which is the belly fat. You have fat subcutaneously, and you have, which is the fat underneath your skin. That's the stuff that we see. That's the stuff that typically people are more concerned about. But you know, they should be more concerned about belly fat than they should be the subcutaneous fat. Yes. But also intramuscular fat. So we have fat within our muscles as well. You know, in between all the different muscle fibers. So, and then you have your organs. You have your hair. All of those things contribute to your overall weight. But the scale doesn't differentiate between all of that. So this is why this is important to get this information out there. When we talk about body composition, we usually talk about your percent body fat. And generally, we're referring to, with most of the testing techniques we use, the clinical techniques like skin fold, and there's a handheld thing called a BIA, which stands for bioelectrical impedance analysis, and a scale. You can step on a scale with bare feet, which is also a BIA device, runs a current from one foot across your torso, down your other foot. A lot of the newer bathroom scales have that capability. And then another technique that we use called infrared. It's a little device we put on your biceps, uses an infrared light, actually first developed by the FDA to measure the leanness of cows before they went to market. But you know, somebody had the brilliant idea of using it on people, and it worked. But those are the typical clinical techniques that we use to measure subcutaneous fat. But they only give you a piece of the picture. If you wanted a more accurate representation of what you're composed of, there's another technique called DEXA, which stands for dual X-ray absorptiometry. It's the same technology that's used to measure bone density. But what it'll do is differentiate between subcutaneous fat and the deeper fat stores like brown fat, which I'm hoping to touch on later on today. Because brown fat is a powerful, powerful discovery, highly metabolic. But also muscle and bone, and your organs. So using a DEXA scan, which you know they run anywhere from $200 to $500, you can get it at any kind of, like, a local radiology place typically has it, and a lot of research institutions have them as well. But you can get the DEXA scan or MRI, which runs upwards of about $2,000. But all of these techniques, they attempt to measure your body fatness. So The clinical techniques that we call those, those are called two-compartment models. You're either fat or you're not. So it's fat or lean tissue. And then the more advanced methods like the DEXA and MRI, those are multi-compartment models because they can differentiate between organs and bone and everything else. Okay. But overall, here's where this is important. Too often we focus on what we can see, which is simple, which is the scale. Now, take for example, let's say January 2nd rolls around and you decide it's time for that New Year's resolution. And you decide, you know, darn it, this is the year that I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to lose weight. Yeah. Well, what does that really mean? So you hire a personal trainer. You go out and you spend a couple $100s on all the fitness accoutrements. You get your Lululemon pants, your brand new workout shoes, your new headphones. You're ready to go. Get your gym membership, and you go and you begin a weight training program, and perhaps like a cardio program as well, and maybe even a dietary restriction program. So you know, you change your diet. So as you're going through the fitness program, you probably are going to see your body change. Your clothes are going to start to fit differently. Mm-hmm. Your waist might get a little small. You have to go an extra notch on your belt. Shirts start to get a little looser, so you go, you know, reward yourself and go shopping. But you step on that scale in the bathroom every morning, and there's no change. Mm. It's still telling you you weigh 200 pounds. Yeah. And you're like, I've been putting in all this effort, and I haven't lost a pound. Yes. You're about ready to fire your trainer now, right? Because you're not getting your goals. So what your trainer is going to do is then use one of these clinical body composition tests, like let's say the skin fold, where we take various sites in the body, literally pinch the skin, use calipers to measure the millimeters of fat underneath the skin. Okay. And what you might find is that even though that scale hasn't budged, your body composition did change. So you may have gone from, say, 25% body fat, which means 25% of your weight is subcutaneous fat, and now you're down to 20% body fat. Well, you lost all that fat, but why didn't the scale move? Well, because you gained muscle at the same time. So the scale was, it was deceiving. It didn't tell you what was actually happening in the body. But even though the scale didn't move, you made huge changes in your body. Mm-hmm. Now that you've lost some of that, because the subcutaneous fat, that's just stored energy. Yeah. So you've lost some of that stored energy, but you've gained highly metabolic muscle tissue, which is going to make you stronger. It's going to make you more powerful. It's going to make you put a bigger engine in your car. So you're going to burn more calories even at rest. Okay. And when you do that, well, you're more likely to keep the weight off in the future because your basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories you need just to exist, is going to go up dramatically. Mm-hmm. So what is the difference between body composition and body weight? It's everything. It is absolutely everything. And understanding that is really, really important. So we want to gain muscle. We want to gain bone mass. These are the things that are going to keep us vibrant and healthy as we age. Okay. We know that after age 25, there's approximately a 10% decrease in your fitness level every decade. Wow. Up until what is now being termed the marginal decade, which is your last decade. And ideally, we all know somebody who's, as they've aged, they've become less and less able to do the things they like to do. They might have difficulty, bringing in the groceries, or maybe have difficulty, playing with their grandchildren, or even taking their dog for a walk. Mm. They've lost muscle power. They've lost muscle mass. They've probably increased body fat at the same time, and they become metabolically less active. At the same time, the likelihood of them becoming insulin insensitive, in other words, developing type 2 diabetes, and God forbid what we now call type 3 diabetes, which is dementia. Mm-hmm. The risk of that increases every single year if we aren't doing something to maintain our muscle mass and our bone mass, and we may even develop osteoporosis. It's not just women getting osteoporosis, men get osteoporosis too. Sure. And then you have a dramatically increased risk of suffering catastrophic fractures as we get older. Interesting stat on that one, after age 65, if you suffer a hip fracture due to a fall, or for any reason, but typically it's due to a fall, approximately 30% of individuals after age 65 who suffer a fall and suffer a hip fracture will be dead within the next year. Wow. Of that 70% that survive, that will actually make it, 50% of that 70% will never regain full function again. They will never return to their previous activity level, which dramatically decreases their quality of life. So we want increased to increase our muscle mass as much as we possibly can. We don't have to be bulking, bodybuilders, but we want to be strong. We want to be powerful. And by the way, muscle power is one of the main metrics that can predict whether or not you're going to fall, even more than strength, even more than balance.
Wow.
Because if you trip on a rug, how are you going to get your feet back underneath you? It's power. It's how quickly you can move your feet.
Yes.
So if you don't have that power, well, you're dramatically increasing that risk every single year. So knowing this, we want to try to gain muscle mass as much as we can.
Okay.
And there are a lot of ways that we can do that. I know we're going to talk about that.
Right.
But overall, as we gain muscle mass, we tend to lose some of that body fat as well, and our body composition changes. So what we're composed of changes, and we become overall more metabolically healthy. So our cells are functioning better. We're less likely to suffer all of the debilitating effects of metabolic syndrome as we age. We're going to have a better life. If you want to go on a hike, you can go for a hike. You want to take your dogs for a walk, take them for a walk. Your dogs will appreciate it too.
Sure.
And you might, some of the listeners, particularly if they're college students, they might be thinking, well, that's not me. That's never going to happen to me. We all say that, and unfortunately, it creeps up on us.
Yeah.
So creating a habit of exercise to maintain that muscle mass, keeping the body fat lower, is always a good thing. But like I said, subcutaneous fat is not really a predictor of these things. We become very fat phobic in society. But the subcutaneous fat, that's stored energy, like I said, and that's readily accessible. That's energy that our body can use when we need it. It's the belly fat that's more concerning, because when we develop that belly fat, like I mentioned in the last podcast, is highly inflammatory. So, and we know that most of these diseases that we develop as we age are directly correlated to systemic inflammation, and that body fat located in the abdomen, that visceral fat, produces large numbers of inflammatory chemicals, which speeds that process along. It accelerates our aging, dramatically decreasing our quality of life. And quite frankly, it increases the risk that we're going to be dependent on medications just to exist, not to thrive, just to live.
Yeah.
And so, ultimately, this has become one of my specialties. One of the things I really focus on is trying to maintain healthy body composition. But with that said, there's a flip side to that as well. Sometimes we can get too far and develop what's called body dysmorphia, which, things like bodybuilders get it quite a bit. They look in a mirror and they're never lean enough, or they're never muscular enough. Yeah. Some people develop it on the other side of the spectrum, where they think they're always too fat when they look in a mirror. They may develop eating disorder like anorexia or bulimia, or orthorexia, which is similar to bulimia, but instead of purging with vomiting or with laxatives, you use exercise to try to burn off all of those calories. Yes. So there's a flip side to that as well. But overall, we want to maintain what we consider a healthy body composition, which, healthy body composition, it varies depending on what your needs are, but are you metabolically healthy? And are you developing these other symptoms like diabetes or early onset dementia? These are the questions you really have to ask. So some people just carry around more body fat. Yeah. It's natural. It's perfectly natural. If that's you and you're healthy, you're metabolically healthy, no problem. That's who you are. Great example of this, and hopefully I don't get sued for this, but Oprah Winfrey put it on display for all of us in the 1990s.
Right.
You might remember, she was queen of media. Right. She, one of the most famous people in America. Everybody tuned in to watch the Oprah Winfrey Show. And she started to put on a little bit of weight. Yeah. And of course, she was eviscerated by the tabloids. You couldn't go to the grocery store without seeing on the tabloids about Oprah Winfrey's weight. Yeah. Well, obviously that's very hurtful. So she did what everybody was doing at that time and went on a caloric restricted diet. She lost weight. Yeah. If you cut calories, you will ultimately, and it's not as simple as calories in and calories out, as I'm sure we'll discuss, but ultimately what happens is you cut enough calories and you exercise and burn more calories, you're probably going to lose some body fat. And she did. And of course, the media reacted and people reacted, and all across the country on all of the tabloids and the news and on the newspapers and even on her show, there was Oprah, the thinner Oprah, picture comparing her to the overweight Oprah. And like, Oprah did it, she lost all this weight, you can too. Well then, what happened though, she was on a caloric restricted diet. And what we now know happens is this: if you restrict calories, you're actually going to drop your basal metabolic rate. That's where you burn all your calories, by the way, is your basal metabolic rate. That's, if you exercise an hour a day, it's the other 23 hours that matter. It's how many calories you're burning during that time. Right. Well, what happens when we go on a caloric restriction is something called NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. It's everything we do not exercising. It's tapping your foot, fidgeting, doing things like that. Just moving throughout the day, standing rather than sitting at your desk. Yes. Again, like I mentioned before, climbing the stairs rather than, waiting for the elevator. All of those non-exercise associated things have such a dramatic impact on our metabolism. Well, what we found in really cool studies looking at Stone Age cultures in Papua New Guinea and in Sub-Saharan Africa, this has been measured with these populations that when they go on a caloric restricted diet, they move less.
Wow.
They're not, and they don't know anything about the exercise. They're not trying to do this. These cultures, they're subsistence cultures. So they're not trying to, look good for the beach or anything like that. Ultimately, what ends up happening is that they just become less active. They don't move as much. And we noticed the same thing when we tested college students. So when we restricted their diets, because college students, as you know, are the perfect subjects for our studies, kind of a captive audience, if you will. Sure. Yeah. So when we give them a restricted diet, we see the same thing happening. Their non-exercise activity thermogenesis goes down. Wow. They stop moving as much, stop fidgeting as much. So they actually stop burning start burning fewer calories. And therefore, when they go to a normal diet, back to from that restricted diet, which is quite frankly, unsustainable, they're now in a caloric balance, a positive caloric balance, where they then end up putting more body fat on. That's what happened to Oprah. So she gained all that weight back and then some. And of course, the tabloids eviscerated her again. Sure. And so she went through this, and we called it a yo-yo dieting syndrome. She went up and down, up and down. And it was obvious because we were seeing the pictures. It wasn't until she hired the luckiest personal trainer in the world, Bob Greene, who, he was constantly on her Oprah book list. Yeah. She hired Bob Greene, hired a nutritionist using some of her millions, and they got her on a normal diet, a healthy diet with whole foods, not the processed foods, and got her on a reasonable exercise program which emphasized weight training, gaining muscle mass and gaining bone mass, which is so important, that we saw her settle somewhere in the middle, which is what we call the set point. And it was her body's happy place. It was the Goldilocks weight, if you will. Yeah. And she's maintained that ever since. So she's maintained a healthy weight, a healthy body fat percentage, and she's become more vibrant and more energetic ever since then. I haven't talked to her about it, but I've heard her say it. So, but having that reasonable exercise program that focused on her specific goals and having a reasonable diet, which again was a healthy diet, just eating natural foods, is all it took. Yeah. And it gave her that ideal body composition.
I like what you said about living versus existing.
Yeah. And
that mindset, can be at any age.
Any age.
It doesn't have to be in the latter years of one's life, and I've heard that before, but I think that's something that needs reiterated, something that not only our college students, but all of our listeners, need to hear that, There's a big difference, between living and just simply existing.
Yeah, what do you want to do? Do you want to be sitting on the couch, unable to climb the stairs, unable to get your groceries? You lose that independence. How's that going to affect your overall, your quality of life? And that's one of the hard questions we have to ask ourselves. Yeah. Some people might be content sitting on the couch until the day they die, which, hey, no judgment, that's fine. Right. But that's not me, right. And I'm sure that's not you. Yeah. I want to be vibrant. Yes. If I ever get grandchildren, I want to be that granddad that they're going to be looking forward to going to see because they know they're going to be doing something fun and adventurous that day. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I was talking to a couple of students as I was doing some homework and preparation, of the PAWSCAST, and so, this is one of our lovely students out there. He asks, is it better to do strength training or cardio for weight loss? Great question. Yeah. I am going to offend a lot of people right now, a lot of the traditionalists who insist you got to do cardio. Okay. There is a saying in exercise science, I mentioned this last podcast, you can't outrun a bad diet. So weight loss, at least 90% of it is diet. You make your body in the kitchen, no question about it. But can exercise contribute to that? And the hard answer is yes. And what type of exercise? Weight training. You have to do weight training.
Okay.
We have to increase muscle mass. It's what supports our skeletal system. It's what allows us to ambulate. We need that muscle mass. It's what keeps us from getting injured when we do have mishaps. But more importantly, muscle is so metabolically active compared to body fat. If you are doing cardio, for example, not cardio. Cardio is weight training, quite frankly.
Right.
You're moving your weight.
Sure.
So if you go out for a run, you're going to be at a lower intensity activity. And we used to use something that we call the fat burning zone with using your heart rate as an indicator for how hard you're training. And basically what that meant was this. If you go out and you run at, say, 5 miles an hour, that's a brisk clip. You're just getting into running. So that's actually the threshold that we use, according to the American College of Sports Medicine, to differentiate between walking and running. It's 5 miles an hour. Above that, you're running. So let's say you're running at 5 miles an hour. The majority of the calories, I want to put that in quotation marks, that you're burning are going to come from probably fat, because it's a relatively low intensity. We would say you're at zone 2 cardio. So your heart rate might be upwards of around 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate, and you're just having to catch your breath a little bit. You're not working that hard, but you're breathing harder because you're bringing more oxygen in to metabolize, fat, proteins, and carbohydrates as a fuel source. But the majority of that energy is probably at this intensity going to come from fat, and a little bit less is going to be from glucose, which is stored in your muscles and in your liver. Now, here's where this is problematic. Let's say you're out running at 5 miles an hour, you may only be burning, say, 130 calories an hour. Not a lot. That's half of a Snickers bar. But at that intensity, a greater percentage of that is going to come from fat. A lesser percentage of that is going to come from glucose. However, let's say you ramped that up. Let's say instead of running for a half an hour at that 5 miles an hour, let's say you do a full-on sprint, 10 miles an hour plus, for a very short period of time, like 30 seconds, because that's all you can maintain. After 30 seconds, you're winded, you're exhausted. We're going to say you're in zone 5 cardio now. You're closer to your maximum heart rate at this point. Okay. You are now, if you were able to do that, take a quick break, maybe 2-3 minute break, and then do it again, and then 2 or 3 minute break and recover, then do it again. So 30 seconds as hard as you can, a couple minutes off. We call that high intensity interval training.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay, yeah.
Is that completely stopping, or are you kind of just slowing down?
Either.
Okay.
Yeah, just bringing it down. So bringing your heart rate down, catching your breath.
Okay.
But you're in oxygen debt at that point, or what we call in the exercise science community as the EPOC, the exercise post-oxygen consumption. Right. You're paying back the oxygen or the energy that you just used. Okay. You were anaerobic during that 30-second sprint, and you're using a 2 or 3 minute aerobic period to replenish your energy stores, so you could do it again. If you did that for, say, the same hour, we'd look at your caloric expenditure, be much higher, like 500 calories instead of 130 or 140 calories. But the percentage of that the majority of that came from glucose, sugar, instead of coming from fat as a fuel source. So it got a bad name. That the anaerobic stuff became more of a strength workout, and the long, slow distance, that zone 2 cardio, when you were at that intensity, we called that the fat burning zone. But it really was deceiving. You were burning a lot more fat, but a lot fewer calories. Whereas if you did the numbers, you'd see that by doing that sprint workout. By the way, sprint workout for the viewers, an hour-long sprint workout like that is very advanced. Don't do that unless you're conditioned. You will hate me. I don't want hate mail. But it would be hard. If you did that for an hour, that 500 calories that you burned at that point, even though the majority of it was glucose, you're still burning more fat by doing that. Right. But here's the real kicker. By doing that high-intensity interval workout, you released a lot of adrenaline. Have you ever tried going to sleep after a hard workout? Good luck. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's like you just took a dose of caffeine. Your heart rate's going to be up for hours, possibly anywhere from 3 to, in some cases, studies have shown 12 hours later, adrenaline levels have been higher. So we're talking about epinephrine. Now, this hormone is going to raise your basal metabolic rate. So your basal metabolic rate, the number of calories you need just to exist, is down here. And then exercise is on everything we add to that. Well, if I do a high intensity interval session, which is resistance training, we just raised your basal metabolic rate for potentially the next 12 hours, which means that if we did this every other day or potentially every day, you just raised your basal metabolic rate almost continuously, which means that you're using more calories, and ultimately, if you, all things being equal, if let's say you don't increase your food intake, you've just created a caloric deficit, and eventually you will start breaking down body fat and you'll lose weight. So combine that with resistance training by adding more muscle. Now, like I said, you're not going to, it's very difficult. Let me say this to the people at home, very difficult to become a bodybuilder. You're looking at least 5 to 6 days per week of 2-hour sessions in the weight room. Just going to the weight room a couple times a week, doing some resistance training for, say half an hour to an hour each time is not going to turn you into a professional bodybuilder. I promise you that. If it was that easy, we would all be bodybuilders. So with that said, getting into the weight room a couple times a week, doing that resistance training, making the muscles a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, and more metabolically active, you just put a bigger engine in your car, just like Oprah Winfrey. So what ends up happening is you could actually eat more, and you probably will, because exercise does make you hungry.
Right.
And so you might actually eat more, but what ends up happening is you're eating more to support that increased metabolically active lean tissue. So ultimately what happens is over time, it's not a quick fix, but over time you get leaner and leaner, and you get closer and closer to your healthy set point. So short answer, yes, weight train. Absolutely essential. It is super. If you had to choose between the two, choose weight training. Okay. If you have all the time in the world, combination of the two, because the long, slow distance will definitely help your cardiovascular system, and there's a lot of benefits there as well, but weight loss generally isn't one of them.
So off camera, we kind of talked about the importance of actually doing a hands-on demonstration, and I'm super excited about that in the near future. Yeah. So this question kind of ties in with that a little bit, and so we'll cover it more extensively when we're down in the workout area. But yeah, just for the listener's sake, briefly, can you just kind of talk about some of the kinds of exercises that are best? Say I want to lose 10 pounds.
Yes.
Yeah.
Multifaceted answer, so I apologize if I'm going to go long-winded here. I can't wait to see my student evaluations at the end of the semester. But this is something that I mentioned last podcast about specificity of training, which is training specifically for a very specific physiological outcome. Yeah. This is where you have to ask yourself those hard questions. Right. General answer, if you had to choose between any weight training exercise, and you had limited time, I recommend what we call compound movements, which are things like leg press, bench press, compound row, where you're actually pulling and rowing, deadlifts, maybe overhead press if you have cardiovascular issues like let's say you have a heart condition or a valvular condition, overhead presses might be contraindicated, but compound movements that use multiple joints and large amounts of muscle mass. We also call those functional movements, because those are the movements that we do in real life that are functional, like climbing stairs, squatting down to pick up a bag of groceries or the cat food, or pick up your child or something like that. Yes. Pushing yourself off the ground if you do fall in order to get off the ground. That'd be an application of a push-up. Pulling yourself over an obstacle like a pull-up. So these compound movements are very, very functional. You're going to get the greatest bang for your buck. You're going to hit more muscle mass in the shorter amount of time. Now, let's say your goal is aesthetics. You want to look good for the beach. You want to get yourself in shape. You buy a bathing suit and you hang it up right in front of your refrigerator and you say, I'm going to get into that bathing suit by the summer. That's my incentive. No judgment. Aesthetics is a very, very real and a viable reason to engage in training. It's why most people do it. So if aesthetics are what you're looking for, then you may start getting into single joint movements. And that's things like bicep curls, tricep extensions, leg curls, exercises like that. But you'd want to combine those with the compound movements, the multi-joint movements. That's going to be important because we call those more like shaping exercises. But let me kind of go to the other side. If you have an injury or a potential injury, let's say you work behind a desk and you've developed that upper and lower cross syndrome like I mentioned before.
Yes.
Doing a compound movement like a bench press could actually destroy your shoulders, and that's actually a common problem. You see that a lot with middle-aged males. You know, they start to exercise once they hit their 40s or their 50s, try to get back in shape, but they do what they used to do when they were in their 20s and they weren't sitting behind a desk all day. But unfortunately, they've developed this forward shoulder posture which closes down a space in their shoulder called the subacromial space that ends up pinching two main tendons, your biceps tendon, long head of your biceps, and one of the four of your rotator cuff tendons. This one's called the supraspinatus. By the shoulders rolling forward, and there's a bursa in there too. I want to throw that in there. Not a lot of space. So now this space gets shrunk down. So any kind of pressing action is going to be done with a bone grinding into the tendons. And it gets inflamed. We get rotator cuff or biceps tendonitis, and we call that subacromial impingement syndrome. That's a problem. That shoulder, particularly if you're, like I said, I use middle-aged males as an example because we're notorious for this. The tendon starts to degenerate, starts to fray. Next thing you know, you go to reach for something on a top shelf and the tendon pops. You have a rotator cuff tear, and now you have surgery and rehabilitation. What should have happened in that case, because of that postural abnormality that you developed, is you should have engaged in what we call corrective exercises first. So we'll do exercises to lengthen the tight muscles and strengthen the weak muscles. We're going to do this when we do the hands-on session. I'm going to give you, we're going to go over the usual suspects, the ones that we see the most often, and some simple exercises to fix that. So it might be something like grabbing some bands and doing what we call scapular retraction. And maybe scapular depression, trying to keep the shoulders from elevating, but getting them to actually go down and open up that space. External rotation of the shoulder rather than internal rotation. So we're going to eliminate the exercises that can cause the problem, add the exercises that will fix the problem. Once the posture is fixed, then we can start adding back those other exercises.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So it's a different paradigm of fitness. It's something new that's happening, and I'm excited. I'm here for it. I'm so glad to see that we're getting away from the bodybuilder mentality in the weight room, and we're taking a more functional approach like that.
So would that be with resistant bands then?
Yeah, you could use resistant bands. You could use dumbbells. There are some machines. I'm a fan of machines in some cases. Some of the machines are great, particularly with beginners, because they're safe, but they don't allow for stabilization muscles to work. And so I try to get people onto free weights and resistance bands as quickly as possible to make it a little more functional. Now I want to add one more piece to this. There are other factors as well when selecting exercises. It could be, like, again, health-related issues. Let's say, now this is a real common one, going back to belly fat. There is a common question that I get, and I think everybody in the fitness industry probably gets this question a lot, is peri and postmenopausal women and the increase in belly fat. What can we do about that? Well, this is something that for years we've been telling them to do the same thing that we told men to do. Wasn't working though. But we'll do it anyways. You're not doing it hard enough, right? You're not working hard enough. Well, it turns out that we were wrong. It turns out that all the research that we've done on this is with mostly men and mostly college-age men. And then when there are women, they're college-age women. Entirely different hormonal profile. So once women get into like peri and perimenopause, which could be anywhere from your some cases early 30s, but usually mid 30s, typically early 40s, all the way up to the point where you are full on in menopause, and that's defined as an entire calendar year where you haven't had a period. So in that period of time, we know that there are hormonal fluctuations and the body responds differently. So there's been a lot of research done working with that particular population to look at what are the hormonal implications because of that situation, and how will that affect your training. Well, we know that if you train doing that high intensity interval training, because that's become almost gospel for weight loss now, do the HIIT training is what we call it, HIIT training. Turns out though, if you're perimenopausal or postmenopausal and you do HIIT training, it could have the exact opposite effect. And here's why. When you do HIIT training, I mentioned that adrenaline is a stress hormone. You are actually creating a stress response that males with large amounts of testosterone can mitigate that stress response. We do well with that. That stress is perfect for us for losing weight. Females, on the other hand, with the fluctuations in testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone that they're experiencing, particularly the decrease in estrogen that's occurring, they're unable to mitigate that stress response as well, and we end up seeing a dramatic spike not only in adrenaline with high-intensity interval training, but also, unfortunately, with cortisol. Cortisol, if you remember from the last discussion, is implicated in that increase in belly fat. It's highly inflammatory, and it increases the belly fat. So turns out we've been banging our heads against the wall doing the wrong thing all these years. So if you are peri or postmenopausal, the recommendation is go heavy. We want you to go heavy. We want you to go at an intensity of about 5 reps, no more. You should be lifting something that you can do 5 times, no more than that. Because we want to keep you in this, what we call the strength phase of training, which is more neuromuscular. You're not going to see an increase in circulating hormones with that intensity, but you're also not going to see an increase in the cortisol levels as well. It focuses on maintaining what we call type 2 muscle fibers, which are the fast twitch muscle fibers, which are the first to go. Those are the ones that are responsible for power and strength. And when we lose those fibers through an aging process called sarcopenia, it happens to males and females. As we lose those fast twitch fibers as we age, we lose our power and we lose our ability to react to our environment. And our metabolism goes down too. So by going heavy, we can maintain those particular fibers, because those are the ones that we keep in reserve for going heavy or in case of emergencies. So we want to train heavy, particularly if you are a peri or postmenopausal female. So about 5 reps, tops, compound movements. Instead of doing high intensity intervals, we use what are called sprint interval training in those situations. So instead of going 30 seconds to a minute of a full-on sprint, you could do this on a bike, you could do this running, but in this case what we would have you do is we would have you go for about less than 30 seconds, 10 to 20 seconds. So you're using a different energy system, your power system, you're tapping into those fast twitch fibers, maintaining that muscle mass, because you use it or lose it, you got to use it to keep it.
Yes.
So, but more importantly, you don't create that metabolic load of the metabolic byproducts that are going to cause inflammation. So if you're peri or postmenopausal, the ideal training would be compound movements. Forget about a lot of those shaping movements with light weights. We have a tendency in the fitness industry to, when we have fitness equipment specifically for women, we shrink it and pink it. We make it smaller and make it pink and say, use this, this is for women. Right. No, in this case, you should be using the same heavy weights that you see on the other side of the gym. Get in there, move the heavy weight. That's where you're going to get the greatest bang for your buck. And then last one thing I want to talk about regarding that is bone mass, bone health. After age 25, women tend to either hang on to or start losing bone mass. So depending on how much bone mass you have up to that point. Now, the clock doesn't stop at age 25. Not on your birthday, all of a sudden you start losing bone mass, but it's around that area. So right around age 25, you start adding and adding, or you continue to add bone mass. After age 25, hang on to what you got, because it's coming. You're going to lose it gradually over time. And then when menopause hits, when estrogen, the protective components of estrogen and progesterone, which help facilitate bone growth, when those hormone levels drop, bone mass starts to deplete rapidly. So a big concern after peri and postmenopause is osteopenia and ultimately osteoporosis, where the risk of fractures dramatically increases. So we now know, again, how to prevent that. Some cases you have a genetic predisposition, not a whole lot you can do about that, other than dietary. You want to make sure you have adequate calcium, adequate vitamin D in your diet, adequate magnesium in your diet, but also resistance training is a non-negotiable. You got to lift the heavy weights, and as a matter of fact, there are new protocols that are being touted on shock training, where you would actually do jumping activity and land with straight legs, which would shock the bones, creating a vibratory effect, which would stimulate bone growth. So we know that vibration matters. So there's actually a proliferation of vibration plates in fitness centers now, which has some effect. It's not great, it's not perfect, but what's actually better? Walking, running, because the ground reaction force creates a tension and a compressive force on the bone, which stimulates bone growth, which at the very least will help maintain your bone mass as you get older. So again, non-negotiable, you got to do some kind of ground force reactive training. So deadlifts, squats, box jumps, stiff-legged jumps, which the jury's out on this one. The data is awesome. The data shows increased bone mass using DEXA scanning in peri- and postmenopausal women who engage in jump training. However, these were relatively healthy individuals that don't have predisposing joint problems. So the jury's out on this one. If you're healthy, do the jump training. And actually, we can demonstrate this later on.
Sure.
But if you have a history of, like, say, knee, ankle, or hip injuries, or if you have a history of back pain, particularly something like a disc lesion, I strongly don't recommend that type of shock training, because that force will go up your body into those damaged tissues and could exacerbate that pre-existing condition.
Can we include jumping rope in that?
100%. Yes, jumping rope is great exercise.
I just remember years in between college, I wanted to try to, lose a few pounds, and go back my junior year, in better shape.
Yeah.
I just jump rope.
Jump rope's
The
great.
entire summer I jumped rope. I met my goal weight.
Yeah.
I felt better than ever, because you get the cardio as well.
100%. Yep.
And so, okay, good. I'm glad you concur with that.
Yeah, big fan. Definitely a big fan.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and move along, because
Okay,
again,
yeah,
we got
absolutely.
a lot to unpack here. For athletes, they have certain, foods and diets, just because of performance and so forth. We're going to talk to the average person, though. What foods should I be eating before the workout, and then what food should I be eating in the after workout, the post workout?
Okay. Again, depends on what you're really training for, what you're trying to accomplish. Exercise will make you hungry. We know that if you've ever engaged. So don't be afraid of that.
Right.
But what you choose to fuel your machine matters. It really does matter. And there are some eating windows that you can really take advantage of in order to optimize your goals. So let's talk about, let's say weight loss, which is one of the most common goals.
Yeah.
Say weight loss is your goal. One of the things that you're going to want to do is you want to eat to support the after exercise. Well, let's start with before exercise.
Yeah.
You need fuel. Now, there is a trend right now about exercising in a fasted state. You may have heard of intermittent fasting.
Yes.
Or time-restricted eating.
Yes.
So a lot of people are seeing success with weight loss with time-restricted eating,
Right.
and some degree of intermittent fasting. So the difference would be, like, with time-restricted eating, you pick a 12-hour period of time, and that's the only time you eat during the day. So it might be 10 a.m. and then you go to well, boy, that'd be 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's a big swing. But some people do that. You'd probably be more likely to see like an 8-hour window, so like maybe 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Yeah.
And that's the only time during the day that you eat, which means you have an extended period of time where you're not eating.
Right.
Ultimately, you are creating caloric restriction when you do that. So that's why a lot of cases we see with time-restricted eating, weight loss does occur. But here's the kicker. It turns out that young men and young women can mobilize free fatty acids, it's the subcutaneous fat, very effectively by exercising in a fasted state.
Okay.
Now, the key factor there is young. So if you were young, we like to say like of reproductive age, you're going to do very, very well exercising in a fasted state. Okay. You're probably going to see increased metabolism of fats, probably enhanced weight loss. However, going back to peri and postmenopause, it turns out that it's a really, really bad idea.
Okay.
Again, the hormone response is completely different. Exercising in a fasted state is definitely contraindicated. You're going to have the exact opposite reaction. Your body's going to be going, what the heck is going on? I'm starving to death here. And so your NEAT, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, is going to plummet. So your basal metabolic rate plummets. Your metabolism actually gets lower and lower and lower if you were in that situation. So we highly recommend eating eating something prior to exercise if you are peri or postmenopausal, if weight loss is ultimately your goal. And you can get away with exercising in a fasted state before exercise, again, if you are a young, reproductive age male or female.
Right.
Okay, so I want to put that across the board first.
Good point.
If you are exercising for performance, you need fuel. Okay, and that should be basically a simple to digest carbohydrate. You don't want anything too heavy, probably nothing high in fats or too high in protein. So a pre-exercise meal would be something Something simple, a little bit of protein, a little bit of fat, a lot more carbohydrates in it.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want carbohydrates in this case. Ideally, complex carbohydrates, some that'll take a little bit longer to break down.
Okay.
I mean, sugar, starches, can you get away with it to a certain degree, but that's going to cause that quick insulin spike and quick absorption. So you might find yourself crashing mid-workout if you eat something with a lot of sugar.
Okay.
So something with more solid, like something with more fiber in it, for instance, something that's going to digest a little bit slower would be a good idea. That'd be a good pre-workout kind of a meal. How soon before your workout? Yeah. Typically, we recommend about 20 minutes. You know, give yourself a chance to digest a little bit, clear your stomach. Because the food, if the food is just sitting there in your stomach and you start to exercise, your skeletal muscles become the priority for the blood in your body, because they're going to need the oxygen and the glucose in order to do the work. So the blood vessels to your stomach constrict, and you end up having less blood flow to your digestive system in order to sacrifice it for the muscles. Well, that means you got food sitting in your stomach going sour. You're going to get nauseous. You might vomit. It happens.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah, we don't want that. We don't want that. Now, on the other hand, CrossFit, their unofficial mascot is called Pukey the Clown, and it's a cartoon of a clown vomiting into a trash can, and it's used as a badge of honor in CrossFit for pushing yourself to the point where you puke. We want to avoid that. That's no fun. All right, but overall, having something to eat before you exercise is good for performance. It's going to give you the fuel that you need. Now, here's the one I really like to talk about: fueling. Now, we're not talking about athletes. It's going to be entirely different with athletes, but fueling after your workout.
Yes.
This is the time where you have the clock is ticking. After exercise and during exercise, your muscles become glucose sinks. They are dying to absorb the glucose in your blood to synthesize it into glycogen, which is going to be a complex carbohydrate that you're going to use as a fuel source tomorrow, the next day, etc. If you have about a 20-minute window, really, I mean, now the research does show up to an hour, but really that first 20 minutes after exercise is the optimal amount of time to eat something with carbohydrate at that time.
Okay.
Because what's going to happen is it won't go to your fat stores, it'll go to your muscle stores and get converted into glycogen. So we figured this out. We know exactly how much you should take in. You want about a 3-to-1 carbohydrate to protein ratio for your post-workout meal, and ideally within 20 minutes of finishing your workout.
So what would that look like?
You ready for this?
Yes.
Chocolate milk is one that has been touted as a almost perfect recovery drink. Now, I don't think it's perfect because it does have a lot of simple sugars in it.
Yes.
A lot of people have milk sensitivities. You might have lactose intolerant. That'd be a really bad idea if you're lactose intolerant.
Right.
But also some people have milk protein sensitivities, which could cause an inflammatory reaction.
Right.
If you're okay with that, if you don't have a milk reaction, a milk protein reaction, and that's typically to casein protein, which is in whole milk, it really is a pretty good recovery drink. It's cheap, it's easy, you just down it, and you got that 3-to-1 ratio of sugar to protein.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. But there are also supplements on the market that you could take, like muscle milk, which doesn't contain milk, ironically. But muscle milk would be one that you could use. Metrex bars is a real popular one. But again, it gives you about that 3-to-1 carbohydrate to protein ratio. Let's say you don't want to do a supplement, you don't want to waste all, well, I don't say waste all your money, you don't want to spend all your money on supplements.
Yeah.
Turkey sandwich. Great, you got whole grain bread, piece of turkey, maybe a piece of cheese on there. Well, let's get rid of the cheese. Let's say you have a dairy issue. Yeah, just how about that turkey, maybe some vegetables on there as well, like tomato and lettuce. That you're going to get that 3-to-1 ratio with that as well.
Wow.
Yeah, and again, that 20-minute window is key, because after 20 minutes, it's a point of diminishing returns where less and less of those calories are going to get absorbed into the muscle, and more of them are going to get absorbed as body fat as storage. So if you do this and time this right, you're going to refill your gas tank for tomorrow.
Yeah.
So you'll have more muscle glycogen tomorrow for tomorrow's workout, and it's going to really enhance recovery.
And with the turkey sandwich, would you agree that we want to kind of veer away from those lunch meats with the nitrates, and we'd rather go with the fresh turkey? And
if you had asked me this 2 months ago, I would have said absolutely. Now I'm going to say maybe.
Okay.
There's some interesting thoughts out there right now in the
Okay.
physiology community that research that was originally done that showed processed meats might not necessarily be as bad as we originally thought.
Okay.
And the fact that those nitrates that we take in actually convert to nitrites, which converts to nitric oxide, which increases blood flow throughout the body.
Yes. Good point.
There's really good questions. I don't want to say yes or no on that one because the jury is still out.
Still out.
But it is interesting to say we might have been wrong, or maybe just off a little bit when it comes to that.
Yeah.
But again, I'm going to wait. I'm not going to start eating a ton of lunch meats right now, personally.
Right.
But it's in the back of my mind. I'm wondering. I'm thinking.
Yeah. And I guess like anything else, check out the sodium content.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, there's certain things probably in certain lunch meats that you do want to stay away from because they just got some bad stuff in there.
Yeah.
And there's probably some other stuff that's out there that's pretty good for you.
Yeah, much better. Better options, without a doubt.
All
yeah.
right.
Yeah, free-range chickens, free-range turkeys.
Yeah.
They eat a lot of bugs. You know,
Yeah.
those are happy chickens, happy turkeys.
Yeah.
Not loaded with antibiotics or growth
Right.
hormones. Great choice.
Yeah.
If you've ever traveled overseas, you probably, like my wife and I traveled to Central America quite a bit. We could do a lot of diving down there.
Okay.
And whenever we're down in like Costa Rica or Nicaragua, the chickens that we see they don't look anything like American chickens. Let me tell you that.
Is that right?
Yeah, American chickens are big and plump and it just tells you what are we putting in these chickens compared to these free-range chickens that are just running around. And they taste different too. They taste a lot better. The eggs even taste better.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep rolling around here. I'm going to skip this one question because, again, I want to kind of ask that later on when we get down into the gym. But, you know, you hear so much about protein, you know, it being important, you know, as it relates to this issue. How much do I need?
Oh, great question. More than you're eating. Okay, I can tell you that right now. When we look at the general population, we are protein deprived. And there's been some amazing research done at McMaster's University in Canada on this. And it's really given us a much, much better idea of what you really should be taking in. Short answer, 1 gram per pound of body weight per day. Okay, so if you weigh 180 pounds, well, let me take that back. 1 gram per pound of your desired body weight,
There you go.
where you want to be.
Yeah.
So let's say you want to gain mass. You're 180 pounds, you want to weigh 190 pounds. Okay, you should be eating about 190 grams of protein per day. You don't do it in one setting. I mean, that's a lot of protein. You're going to be sitting at that table for a long time. So you want to break it up into multiple meals per day. So an easy way to do it is to break it up into every like 2 or 3 hours. And it doesn't have to be a full meal each time. This is where supplements are really, really beneficial. So for example, I'm going to give you an example of what I do. Okay, I weigh 190 pounds. I want to maintain my 190 pounds. I'm not trying to gain or lose. So I'm taking in 190 grams of protein per day, which actually comes out to about 1.6 to 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, which is a little bit more accurate. So you know, you might be taking a little more, a little less than you need, but you're right in the ballpark. So here's how I do it. First thing in the morning, we have eggs every morning. We get our eggs locally. We try to avoid the processed ones.
Yes.
So I'm not going to divulge my sources for our free-range eggs. That's our secret.
More for you.
That's exactly right. So we get our eggs, and my dogs get eggs every morning too. So I have very happy dogs. But my wife and I have scrambled eggs every morning. Have to do scrambled so the dogs can get some too.
Sure.
Yeah. They were watching. They know whether or not they're each getting the exact amount. So on average, I'm taking in about 2 to 3 eggs, whole eggs per day in the morning. But also with my coffee, what I do with my coffee is I put a scoop of whey protein in there, which is casein rich. Whey protein is milk derivative. I tolerate it well. Some people don't. You could use something like pea protein if you are a vegan. Again, whole protein, it works great. You know, there are other versions. You can get a beef protein, which is made from the renderings of what was cut off of cows in a slaughterhouse. Kind of gross to think about, but it's sterilized. They grind it up. It turns it into a powder. And there's one brand that actually tastes like a chocolate hamburger. Sounds a little gross, but believe it or not, actually kind of tasty.
There you go.
Yeah, but you're getting about 20 grams of protein per scoop with any one of these varieties. So I use whey protein in the morning. And what I'll do is I'll take my coffee with a blender, fill it up halfway with ice, scoop of whey protein in there, pour my coffee in there. I use this creamer that's delicious. It's called Laird. Laird Hamilton has a whole food company. He's a professional surfer, so it's all organic, and it's organic cacao, and it's sugar-free, and I put that in there. And then I blend it. And so I'm getting my caffeine hit, which I can't function without. I need that coffee in the morning, but I'm also getting another dose of protein. So my overall protein intake on my first meal of the day is usually around 30 grams, plus or minus a couple grams. Then my mid-morning snack, typically like today, what I have is I have a protein bar, which is only 4 different ingredients. It's mostly egg, so that's where the protein is coming from. So I try to eat as clean as possible. So it's an organic protein bar and a grass-fed, grass-finished beef stick.
Okay.
That's another 30 grams.
Yeah.
Lunchtime rolls around. I'm going to have a lean protein for lunch, typically some vegetables with that as well, maybe a starch, but I try to keep the carbohydrate intake lower. Mid-morning, mid-afternoon, I'll have my workout later today, and immediately after my workout, another protein shake.
Okay.
So then dinner, we'll have some kind of a protein with, typically with vegetables, and maybe a starch, maybe not, it depends. But overall, what it ends up happening is by the end of the day, I've had 5 meals, and I've broken that 180 grams of protein down within those 5 meals.
Wow.
Yeah. So it takes a little bit of planning.
Sure.
Not a lot of planning, but just a little bit of planning.
Yeah.
But it makes a difference.
Well, in the spirit of what we're talking about, the next question is based on what are some healthy snacks, that I can incorporate into my fitness goals and training program?
Oh, great question. Just try to avoid anything hyper-processed. Processed foods we can't avoid.
Yeah.
If it's in a package, it's convenient. It's just, there are a lot of us on this earth, and we got to feed the population.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we are dependent, by and large, on food processing.
Yeah.
So it's the hyper-processed stuff. It's the stuff where all the nutrients have been extracted, and all that's left is starch.
Yeah.
So try to avoid things as a snack. Like, candy bars are a terrible idea. I know you're hangry, avoid the Snickers. Sorry, Snickers, or Snickers lovers out there, but try to avoid that. It's pure sugar. It's not gonna help you in your fitness goals at all.
Yeah.
It'll give you a brief feeling of satiety, but overall though, what's gonna end up happening is that you are going to just have an insulin spike. So ideally, you can't go wrong with vegetables. Like just cutting up some vegetables, preparing those make a great snack. I'll do that on occasion. Personally, it's I do strive for 5. We are always trying to make sure that we do get our roughage. Eat your fiber. Right now, if you are college age, you are at an age group that is, we're seeing the highest incidence of colon cancer of any other age group. And we've been trying to figure this one out for a couple years, and all the evidence right now is pointing to a dramatic deficiency in fiber in the diet. The recommendation is about 30 grams of fiber per day, and nobody's getting that.
Yeah.
So we make a conscious effort every day to get that fiber in your diet. Colon cancer is no joke, guys. So get that fiber in your diet. Having vegetables, great choice, because you're going to get fiber. You're going to get all the essential nutrients that you need from that. But also, I like protein's going to give you the satiety. It's going to fill you up. So that's where I personally I do advocate for using supplements in this case. Like if you're trying to increase your protein intake, a great snack is a protein bar.
Yeah.
And there's some really good ones on the market. RX bar is the one that I prefer. I'm not being endorsed by them.
Not promoting any particular product.
Yeah, but it's
what you choose.
It's one I choose. It's 4 ingredients,
Yeah.
and they're delicious. They really are tasty, and they have a very low glycemic index, so it's not going to create an insulin spike. But also, I also pay a little more, unfortunately, but you get what you pay for like I said, grass-fed, grass-finished, like beef sticks or venison sticks or something from wild game, because they tend to be very high in omega-3 fatty acids compared to omega-6 fatty acids, which are really, really, in the standard American diet, we eat the majority of our fatty acids as omega-6s, which are pro-inflammatory. We need some, but we get way too many.
Yes.
So the goal is a 3-to-1 to a 6-to-1 ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s. And the standard American diet is it's usually about 20 to 1, which is unbelievably highly pro-inflammatory. So we can talk later about what omega-3s and omega-6s do, because it's an important thing to keep in mind. But omega-3s are, these are like fish oil, for instance. So I do take a fish oil every morning, but I take a krill oil, which is similar.
Right.
And, but eating wild game tends to have high levels of omega-3s compared to omega-6s, because those wild animals, grass-fed, they're eating grass, and grass is making omega-3s, and they eat the grass, it becomes them, we eat them, and then we absorb what they're eating. So if you're eating like factory farmed cows or factory farmed sheep or factory farmed chickens, they're all being fed with corn. And that corn is highly inflammatory. It's very high in omega-6s. So I try to, whenever personally, I try to eat my snacks. I really, really try to eat something healthy. Now, that doesn't always work, because life, you know. So when I'm traveling, or I just don't have enough time to prep, I forget sometimes. I still try to, oh God, I hate to say this, so don't crucify me for this, but sometimes
no judgment zone.
Yeah, sometimes I do stop at fast food. So I'll be the first to admit it. And what I'll tend to do is, like if I stop at Arby's, I'll get the big roast beef and just take the bun off. It's not the best meat. I'm sorry, Arby's, don't sue me, but probably not the best choice, but it'll do. I don't do it every day. It'll get me by, and it'll be an okay choice. It'll fill me up. I won't be hangry. It'll keep my metabolism going, and it'll work as kind of a bridge to get me to my next meal.
So for me personally, I have a goal weight in mind, and it involves losing 25 pounds. And so I feel convicted to eliminate processed sugar from my diet.
Fantastic.
Okay. It's tough, because I'm a sugar addict. I profess, you know, it's just my downfall. But so far, it's been a week, doing well. But I enjoy honey.
Honey is sugar.
And I don't use it constantly. It is sugar. You know, so what are your feelings about that?
Honey is fructose.
Right.
It is fructose, and it will have a similar effect. Well, sucrose, I mentioned this last time. Sucrose is table sugar. Sucrose is a fructose and a glucose combined. So when we eat it, once it gets to our small intestine, they split up. And guess what happens? Now we have the effects of glucose, which is glycolation. It might store in your muscles, might store in your liver, but it may also cause glycolation of your cells, and you know, ultimately break down your cells. The fructose, if you can't use it immediately as a fuel, will get stored either in your belly fat or in your liver, and that is one of the things this is why we always say high fructose corn syrup was so bad, because it can lead to a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So, no, what you're having is fructose. With honey is fructose, and our body does not tolerate fructose well. However, it is a quick source of energy. It was really meant to be used in the short term. Very, very short term. It's a treat. An example I like to use in class is watch a bear tear into a honeycomb in a tree stump and withstand hundreds of stings. It's getting an easy source of calories, and it's willing to make that sacrifice of getting stung by bees to do that. And you said that you're addicted to sugar. Well, we kind of all are. We're hardwired as mammals to get those simple calories. They're easy. They're easy calories. And fruit gives us, and which is, you know, ultimately fructose. Fruit and honey give us that. Now, honey has some benefits, particularly if you have allergies, because you know you're getting microdoses of the allergens that you might normally have a reaction to. So it kind of helps your immune system adapt to those, so you don't have seasonal allergies. So there is an advantage there, but it's still sugar. It's still going to have that same reaction. And interestingly enough, I mean, when we look at functional MRIs of the brain, the pleasure centers of the brain, there's a famous one that's on the internet that you can look up, that it is a side-by-side comparison of a functional MRI of the dopamine centers of the brain on sugar and on cocaine. And the one on sugar is brighter. So the mitochondria in that area are lit up. They're just loving the sugar. We are hardwired for that, and it drives our behavior. So yes, it's hard to quit. If you decide to cut out sugar, I'll tell you this and the listeners this, there's a phenomenon called the keto flu. And whenever you go on any kind of not just caloric restricted, but sugar and or starch restricted diet, first 2 weeks are going to be hell. They're going to be miserable. You're going to have brain fog. You're going to feel sluggish.
Nauseous at times.
Nauseous at times.
Tired.
Very tired. But an interesting thing happens right around the 2-week mark. You wake up feeling like a diesel engine, like you could go forever. Yeah. And what's happening is you're fat adapting at that point. And as you fat adapt, you're learning to not depend on the sugars as a fuel source. Yeah. So anticipate that. You're in week 1, next week's going to be miserable, but just enjoy it. And we'll embrace the suck, as they say, because you're going to come out on the other end and you're not, your cravings for sugar will go down dramatically at that point.
I guess, does it really count then if I had some honey though? I mean, is it?
It counts.
Yeah, I think so. And for me, I do use it because I do have some serious allergies. I'm allergic to practically everything seasonally, grass and mold and, all the stuff that's out there. So, and I don't I think, consume it. It's probably a justification statement for me to use honey. Yeah. But it does help in those other areas.
In that case, I mean.
So maybe when I use it and how much, minimize or limit the amount, may be a healthy option for me. I don't know.
Absolutely. Like try it right after exercise.
Right after.
Again, that 20-minute window would be a great time to have sugar. Okay. If you have to have sugar, that's a great time to do it, during that 20-minute period.
So my turkey sandwich and a little bit of honey.
Yeah.
Okay.
That actually sounds pretty good.
Sounds good. Yeah. Well, listen, we're running out of time. This is great stuff. I want to get you back. Do you think that we can, I know this is a big one, recomposition, building muscle and losing fat at the same time?
Absolutely.
Can we touch on it a little bit?
Yeah, definitely.
And maybe come back to it at some point. Love to have you back. Because again, I've got like so many questions, not only from myself, but from our listeners and friends and family members as well.
Very cool.
So hopefully a part 3, and maybe in the new year, just because of our schedules, and we have other podcasts lined up with other issues in the next couple of weeks before the semester ends. Yeah. So,
New Year's perfect.
It would be.
We'll address those resolutions and how to get there.
I would love that. So maybe touch on this a little bit. Recomposition. Right?
Body recomposition. You're basically just adding muscle mass, losing body fat. That's ultimately, well, I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but it's really what most people who you start a fitness program want. And it really is exactly what we were just talking about. You're adding muscle mass through resistance training and diet, and you're losing body fat to basically reshape or recompose your body. As long as you follow the basic guidelines of engaging in resistance training, ultimately, the ideal thing is several times a week. And when I come back, I would love to talk about the differences in the programs, because it is different. A program to build strength is different than a program to add muscle mass.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, they're they're going to look entirely different. But ultimately, and this is where a lot of people get this wrong, they think that in order to recompose their body, to just lose the body fat, what you're going to do is just go caloric restriction and do cardio. We know that doesn't. It works in the short term, but it doesn't work in the long term. Yeah. Long-term body recomposition does require resistance training. So you want to engage in resistance training at least 2 times per week, ideally about 3 times per week. And if you wanted to go on a full-on bodybuilder routine, you might be 6 times per week. But you're training a different body part each day, allowing 4 days of rest in between. So you're never really overtraining at that point. You're hitting different areas each time. And you're training with a different intensity compared to strength. Strength, you're going to be going for very high intensity. For adding muscle mass, we call that hypertrophy. For hypertrophy, it's going to be a moderate intensity. So it's going to be something that you can do probably 8 to 12 times before you reach fatigue. But that's the key, though. You want to reach fatigue regardless of the type of resistance training you're doing. So when you're doing the exercises, you want to reach that point of momentary muscle fatigue where you feel like you can't move the weight anymore. Use a spotter, so the spotter can get the weight off of your chest or keep you from collapsing if you're doing squats. But use your spotter, or if you're on a machine, typically the machines just re-rack the weight. But you want to reach that point of muscular fatigue. That's going to be the stimulus. Okay, now the recovery. The next few days, that's where the muscle gain is going to occur. So you want to support it with your nutrition, and that's where the protein intake really comes in. So very briefly, we recently discovered a molecule that is the molecule for muscle growth. We now know exactly how this happens. And it's a balance between something called mTOR, which is, we used to call it the mammalian target of rapamycin, but now we found that it's in more than just mammals, so now we call it the mechanical target of rapamycin. So we just abbreviate it as mTOR. Releasing mTOR is essential for protein, or for what we call muscle protein synthesis. Now there's another molecule in our body that it's called myostatin. It's what it keeps us from getting too much muscle mass. Okay. We've actually experimentally modified mice, dogs, specifically whippets, and cattle to make them myostatin deficient, and they grew into what looked like monster bodybuilders. They just naturally eating because the myostatin wasn't there to actually suppress muscle growth. Not a good thing. We need a balance. Most of these animals die early due to enlarged hearts. So their hearts grow as well, so they end up developing arrhythmias and dying. So we don't want that, okay? We want a balance of the two. So here's how you get that balance: heavy resistance training. We know that by training heavy to fatigue, you have to have that metabolic fatigue, the point where you can't move that weight anymore, will activate mTOR, but also hyperloading of protein. Specifically, like proteins that are very high in an amino acid called casein. Oh, I'm sorry, not casein. The whey protein. Whey protein it has the highest amount of the essential amino acids that are necessary to actually trigger the mTOR release. Now, casein is another milk protein. It's a slower digesting one, something you can take at night, but whey protein tends to be superior. But also chicken breasts are good with this as well. Salmon, if you want to eat fish, really any cold water fish. But by hyperloading protein, and again, we know the level, it's 1.6 to 1.8 grams per kilogram, or 1 gram per pound of body weight. So if you hyperload protein, that will also stimulate mTOR release. If you combine hyperloading of protein through your diet with heavy resistance training, you will add muscle mass. Your body will begin the recomposition process at that point. And assuming you're not just devouring tons and tons and tons of simple carbohydrates, also, you're going to start losing body fat as well. Your body's going to be metabolizing that body fat as a fuel, and you will recompose. So again, it's a slow process. There are no quick fixes. Anytime somebody promises you a quick fix or a magic bullet, it's more than likely a lie. Okay, it's a bad thing. Yeah. And I guess if we have a second, talk a little bit about GLP-1s like Ozempic.
Hey, I have all day, but I know your time is limited today, so
okay,
if you have a second, go ahead.
Let's talk a little bit about that. The new, speaking of magic bullets, the wonder drug, the GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy, will those allow you to lose weight? Well, I think the evidence stands for itself. Yes, individuals who are using these drugs, these injectables, are losing large amounts of weight. And the way they work is they suppress your hunger drive. They also suppress the reward system, so you don't get the same reward that you would normally get for food. And as we know, reward drives behavior, whether it's addiction or if it's just everyday behavior. Like, think about training a dog. You train your dog with rewards. You give him that little dopamine hit. So what we know about this is that GLP-1s kind of suppress that. So you're not hungry. And people who take them say, yeah, their hunger just craters. They don't feel like they're hungry during the day, so they don't end up grazing. They don't end up snacking all day, so their caloric intake decreases. Am I a fan of this? Kinda. If you need it, if you need help with behavior change, then I think GLP-1s they're a godsend. They are the miracle drug that they are touted to be. But they have to be combined with the behavior change. So it's not enough to just not eat and then waste away. Right. Because what these are short-term studies because we haven't been using this very long. That's true. The studies are showing that a large amount of the weight that you lose is not just body fat, but muscle mass, and in some cases bone mass as well. We don't want that. We got to keep our bone mass, we got to keep our muscle mass in order to be vibrant and healthy, not just now, but in the future. So if you combine caloric restriction, which will help you lose body fat by taking perhaps like a GLP-1, with adequate protein intake and heavy resistance training, jury's still out on this, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but we think you will be able to maintain your muscle mass and perhaps even increase it and maintain your bone mass and perhaps even increase it while still losing body fat. So using something like, again, these are prescription drugs, but using something like a GLP-1 will, again, I'm not being sponsored by Ozempic, but Ozempic, if you want to send me a lot of money, I'm for it. But these drugs can be used as a catalyst for the recomposition process. Yeah. But again, nothing's for free.
Right.
You gotta maintain that muscle mass, or you will pay the price in the future.
Yeah. I mean, in anything that's important to you, it's worth the effort.
Yes.
You have to have a mindset. Again, we talked about living versus existing.
Yeah.
John, I am super impressed. I mean, I know you were good, but man, you are great.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And listen, I just want to challenge our listeners and viewers out there. If you have a son or daughter that's eventually going to be coming to college, please look into Frostburg State University. This is the type of education that you're going to get if you come to Frostburg State University. Our exercise and sports science program is top-notch. Not only John Wright, but his colleagues I know real well. They are great, they're smart, they're passionate about their particular profession, and really invested in our students here at Frostburg State University. Again, I want to give kudos to Mel Lombardi, who is in charge of this beautiful studio. We've developed a wonderful partnership with her. And again, if you're a student and you're looking for a communications program, please contact her. We'll put up some information at the end of the PAWSCAST. But look into Frostburg State University. We would love to have you. You'll get a great education. Here's one of our finest faculty members, John Wright, and he will teach you a lot. You will learn a lot from being in his classes. So again, John, thanks for being here. I look forward in the new year to having you back and going into the gym and learning some more stuff, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in the next episode, we're going to have Miss Carrie Moffitt. She works at our local hospital, UPMC, and she's going to be talking a little bit about addictions. She's a life coach, so you'll want to tune into that. But in the meantime, please remember, healthy choices equal healthy lives, and we'll see you again.
Thank you for being a part of our PAWSCAST. This health and wellness podcast is brought to you by the Prevention Center and Peer Education Network at Frostburg State University. If you would like more information about our programs, visit us in Pullen Hall, room 109, or call us at 301-687-4761. Or you can always send us an email at safeoffice@frostburg.edu. Remember to watch our other episodes and stay tuned throughout the semester. Thank you.